Here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Hey, happy Sunday to you. I hope you're doing well. It really is whatever day of quarantine. But on the line with me is Adam Sinkus. Interesting story. We are part of the Mighty Tribe, which is led by Josh Tapp. And I simply asked the question, hey, anybody want to talk about their sleep patterns during this whole thing and whether they're losing sleep? Any comments? And sure, I went out for the people that do the studies. But then Adam Sinkus, he commented and he reminded me, I don't have to look for the leadership, for the studies, for the scientists. I have real people on the ground that are dealing with the same thing. I think everybody is. And so Adam Sinkus Collaborations, you're a leader. You have a leadership program. Are you losing sleep during all this craziness? I mean, that was kind of where we started the conversation.
So this last week, I would say yes, but normally no, not nearly as much. Yeah, last week was a bit crazy because I've been doing some late night business calls, but this week we're kind of we're gonna get back to the normal, which is I find it's interesting because I can tell when I get to that point where I haven't had enough sleep, where I'm not doing the right things because like my motivation just absolutely just drops to get anything done. And then I sit here and get sucked into the fun world of social media and all that other stuff that I don't need to be doing instead of really getting things done. So, but yeah, sleep and routine is hugely important in just keeping on the norm during all of this.
Well, let me ask you, first of all, what inspired you to answer the question? Because sometimes you throw a question out there, you barely get an answer. So what inspired you to actually answer?
I am just genuinely engaged with people and making connections and like to throw out there and see what people are thinking, and so like you, I am a content creator when it comes to social media and just being out in the world. I like to put things out there and see where it sticks. But on the same token of that, I always think it's interesting to go down paths that maybe aren't paths that you typically go down and have the conversations that are a little bit a little bit different than your norm. So,
well, I know that you don't usually talk about sleep because you're talking about your Adam Sinkus collaborations, but I do feel like leaders today and anybody today is losing their sleep pattern, and especially if you have a business. And I know that's where you focus on is business collaborations. And let's face it, there are small businesses suffering right now, and I'm sure they're not getting sleep either.
Yeah. No, I think it's important, like when all this started going down, and I've worked at home for a while, so this is nothing new to me. But when all this started going down, I was all in on the philosophy that whatever you do, get into a routine. It doesn't have to be, your wake up at 6:30, 7 o'clock to rush out the door routine. It could be wake up at 9 o'clock. It could be wake up at 10 o'clock, whatever works for you, but make a routine and get up at the same time every single day. Because as soon as you start to push yourself out of that normal pattern, it's like, have you ever had those days where you wake up, you have to get up like 2 hours before you're normally getting up, and the whole day you just feel like kind of in that fog?
Well, actually, I've kind of not gotten up until recently, till about 9 or 10 in the morning on weekdays, 9 the latest. But I actually collaborate now in the morning on a podcast with someone who goes live at 9 in the morning. So I've gotten myself up at 8 to go live before him to make it all make sense. And that routine has really changed me. So I'm not in a fog anymore because I have a purpose to get up early, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and that's my point there, right? Whatever that time is, it doesn't matter. But if one day I'm getting up at 7 o'clock, the next day I'm getting up at 9 o'clock, the next day I'm getting up at 6 a.m., your body never can make that adjustment. And so what happens, at least in my experience, is that you start to get in this kind of funk. And when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're not really operating at our prime, we become easily distracted. We go down, like I mentioned, I go down the rabbit hole of social media just because I love talking to people.
Sure.
But that's a focus issue. And really we become ineffective at that point. And so as a leader, it is hard sometimes to get the right amount of sleep, especially, in our global economy. You got business happening anywhere from, really 24 hours a day, depending on who you're dealing with in the world. And, and that's that can always be a challenge. It always will be a challenge actually moving forward. And so, you have to set, I think, clear boundaries of when it is okay to work in those off times. Because, the reality is if you do it, people are going to ask you more. And if you continue to do it, people are going to ask you more. So, so it's just starting off with setting clear boundaries, right? And so I typically will stop working at about 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. Occasionally I will take a call at 8 or 9 o'clock, but that's the exception, and I don't allow it to be the norm. That way, I can spend a little bit of time in the evening with my family, winding down a little bit, because that's another thing I think we miss, and I'll circle back to that in a minute.
Sure.
But I get that chance to wind down. I get to do something I enjoy. Not to say I love what I do, and in running a marketing company, and really, really getting to do that entrepreneurship thing, which is so much fun. But I also like to play video games, and
you like to have a life outside of work. I get it. I get where you're coming from. Well, and that's, so you talk about timing of people waking up, and maybe I'm a little too cynical, but I feel like as this thing continues, and it probably will here in New York for a while, sadly, I just feel like the will of the people is going to start to be gone. Am I wrong in thinking that?
No, I think you're right. I think, I think people, I was reading, and actually I watched a video, it's a very empowering video about the people that are, out on their porches, on the high rises, playing music in the evenings. And
love that.
Like all that stuff is what they're doing to battle the compartment syndrome, I call it, right? We're becoming compartmentalized as a society. And so I think it's easy to get into a funk, right? Because it's easy to go, well, I don't have to be up at 8 o'clock today, so I'm just not going to, right? And then tomorrow comes, and you're like, well, maybe. And then the next day comes, crap, I got to be up at 8 o'clock, and you get into that routine. So, or this non-routine funk of sleep, and you go from having a solid 7 or 8 hours every night, or even some people, I'm one of those people, I function on like 6 hours of sleep far better than I do 8 hours of sleep. It's a weird phenomenon, but there are plenty of people like me out there in the world as well. But the point here is that I get a consistent 6 hours of sleep every night. And so, I'm very regimented to a schedule. So with my home office and with my family home all the time, I essentially set office hours, right? Not to say that they can't come in and ask me a question. They can't do what they need to do throughout the day. But my office hours is focused on doing work, getting work done, right? And so I start my office hours at 9 o'clock. I don't stop typically any earlier than 5:30. And so everything in between there is really built around anything that I'm doing for work. And so, I don't do things like laundry. I don't do things like clean the house. I don't take time to do any of those because it's outside of that schedule, right?
Oh, you do it after office hours then?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yep. Or on the weekend, and so by doing that, it allows me to have that semblance of this is work time, this is other time, and disconnects those times just like you would have if you're going to an office. So,
Right.
That's what I found works the best. And everything I've read and everything I've talked to a lot of work at home experts, as this was all kind of starting to ramp up, and everybody has the same sentiment, right? It's get good amounts of sleep, make sure you're shutting down, and really, work on a consistent schedule, just like you're going to the office. So,
well, and I was thinking, so you talk about how you're doing your office hours. I live with my mom, my stepdad right now. I mean, I shelter at home, and they're all working. So I feel like we're all kind of three different colonies of people doing our own thing in the house. But I say to get sleep and to go to sleep, you cannot let the household go to sleep upset at each other or something like that, or even if you have a fight with someone who's not sheltering with you, or how you can't go to sleep angry, right? That's kind of what I've been talking about also, is that to get good sleep, mending fences before you go to sleep is actually a big deal.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. The best sleep comes by removing the most distractions, right? So, in having a fight or being upset with somebody is a huge distraction to your sleep. Why? Because you're worried about the overall outcome of what's going to come from that. And so, whether it be somebody in your household, something that happened while you were working, it really doesn't matter. But you're 100% right. We need to mend that. We need to fix that. I call it taking the monkeys off of your back, right? So figuring out what's important to worry about, what's not important to worry about, and passing off those things that we don't need to carry around with us.
Right. And so how do you do that? Like what experience would you say that you've had to mend a fence or get the monkey off your back before you went to sleep? Even with the client, anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, no. When it comes to just straight up disagreements, the things that happen in married life, the things that don't make it to Facebook, I always say, first thing first is, pause and let's have a conversation about it. And my wife, my wife and I, we are both very stubborn people. But at the end of the day, if we can stop, pause, and have a conversation about it, that's the start to the end, right? It's not about solving it right there. It's about getting everything out in the open so that we know how we can solve it. And once we do that, then we can get to a point, within a very short period of time, and half an hour to where we're both back on the same page and everything is good to go. When it comes to work, though, I am a huge proponent of a notebook and a journal. So at the end of every single working day, I make a list of everything that I need to get done that's still open, right? And the reason I do this is because I find if I get it out of my head, I can stop worrying about it. Right? Because What do we do when we make a list internally? We're worried about not forgetting anything on the list. It's like going to the grocery store, right? You get the list of 10 items, and I don't know about you, but me, notoriously, I will miss one item on that list, no matter how many times I repeated it back to the person that gave it to me. And so anytime we have items in our mind that we're trying to not forget and trying to make sure we worry about getting done, all that stuff becomes, again, a distraction to your sleep. So I will make a list at the end of every day of all the stuff that I need to get done. And then I go take it a step further because I find that a lot of things we deal with in our work are things that aren't necessarily ours, right? Okay. Taking the monkey off your back. So I look at all those tasks as I write them down and I decide, is this something that's under my control and that I need to take care of directly, or is it with somebody else? And if it's with somebody else, I cross it off my list. I get rid of it because it's not mine at that point. And
Right.
so by holding on to it, now I'm holding on to that extra baggage. And again, we're getting back to distractions while you sleep.
Well, I was just thinking about this as well as we're talking, because you do a company called Adam Sinkus Collaborations, and
Yep.
you can find him on LinkedIn. You're on Twitter as well, Adam?
I am on Twitter. I am on Facebook. I am on YouTube as well with my new Winning Tactics podcast.
Very cool. Congratulations on that. When
Thank
did you
you.
start that?
A couple weeks ago. So it's not nearly as formal as this, but we have a good time talking about business and just what issues are impacting small businesses. So,
Well, to be honest, I kind of run mine as like, what happens if this ever made it to air one day? I kind of make it so talk radio driven. I hope it comes off like that, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
No.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, no, I started doing it because I needed a better way to get some video content out there. And so it was like, well, here we go.
Well, very cool. So the reason I bring that up, Adam Sinkus Collaboration, is you've got business collaborators that are probably talking to you during this whole
Yep.
thing. And what are you advising them? I mean, they've got to be a mess right now.
Yeah, so we're getting back to the basics, right? So reinvigorate the why. Really getting back to understanding, why did you get into business? Why are you passionate about whatever your business is? And then just refocusing from there, going, okay, cool. We know why. Why you're doing this. Now let's help make it sustainable. So. We've spent a lot of times talking about all the loans and grant programs that are out through the Small Business Administration, which it looks like those wells are going to dry up here very quickly. So it's going to be back to some kind of creative financing options for some of these companies. But we talk about things like marketing. We talk about just what is your plan, right? Because, again, it's about removing distractions, and the unknown is a huge distraction that we
Sure.
we typically let the unknown consume us. So I'm really focused with them on how do we become smart in this time? How do we take away as much of the unknown as we possibly can? And how do we pivot strategies so that you don't have to worry about the unknown the next time?
Well, and so give us like an experience that you've had talking sort of someone off the, I'm going to quit this because all this is happening ledge. Have you had any of that story to tell?
I have not, thank goodness. We just really the biggest conversations I'm having is really just stepping back and talking about the why, right? So, once we get back to that core, I haven't talked to anybody that I would call on the ledge, right? They're just they're worried about people. We're talking small businesses. A lot of these people, operate like almost like a family, and so it's a very hard decision to go. It's in the best interest of the business. It's in the best interest of you for me to put you on furlough, right? But that's a real conversation that business owners need to have, because you can't be too deep into paying out payroll and not be able to pay things like your lease and your power and your water and and things like that, right? So you have to be smart as a business owner, and that's what I'm getting. That's where I'm going with the business owners is, let's take a step back and let's figure out how to be smart through this. And make the best decisions that are going to allow you to come out on the other side of this. Because at the end of the day, you know what, I'll be honest with you.
Sure.
Pretty much every small business owner that I talk to, they're worried about two things. They are worried about providing for their family, and they're worried about providing for their employees. So, which I have to say, I'm really lucky with the businesses that I work with, because they're all really awesome people-centric businesses. But that's a commonality that I see, And so, so we attack those things, right? So it's about having conversations, getting all the unknown out there, and then coming up with a plan so you can get it off your plate and get refocused on what's going to take you to the next step.
Well, I tell you, I feel like you're playing a role right now because everybody's panicking about the SBA loan, and oh my goodness, and it's bad that the funds ran out. But what do you, when you advise your clients, what are you telling them about the loans? Like, what is your advice on that?
It's really about being smart. The SBA loans weren't for everybody. The grants were okay. I feel like there was a lot of businesses that probably took it that didn't necessarily need to, which is why they took it out of fear of the unknown and left some of the other businesses that weren't in as good of a financial state to kind of be hanging. So not to say that there isn't other programs out there now. There are a few. There's grant programs. And it looks like everything that I've read, it looks like they're trying to figure out alternative ways to fund the SBA programs as well. So I don't know that those are down and out yet, but they're definitely slowing down. So so now it's wartime tactics, right? So right. It's what do we need to double down on to make sure that you come out of this successfully? What can we cut back at, and what strategies are we going to pivot to make sure that we can take advantage of any opportunity you could possibly have to do some business, right? So, a lot of them are just getting back to the basics, revisiting processes within their business, becoming more efficient. Marketing is a huge piece right now, especially digital marketing, with everybody being on the internet, that's a huge space to get into. And it does take some time to really get like huge amounts of traction, but most small businesses already have a website. So there's things you can do with your website and making sure that you're putting content on it, making sure that it's optimized and really just tying it back to things like your Facebook, your LinkedIn page, all that kind of stuff that are quick, easy things that will gain you traction in the digital space. And then, obviously the big elephant in the room is there's Facebook ads and right. Google AdWords that, you can spend as little or as much as you want on, but either way, those are also great opportunities to get your name out there. The key here in my mind is that people aren't spending as much, but you still need to make sure your name is out there. So as soon as they are ready to spend, who's the first person they call? Right. So,
hey, Adam, I've got a question. So you just mentioned the war zone, and I got to ask this. Have you luckily had no one affected by COVID? Have you had family or friends, or has your area in Florida been touched?
We are one of the most concentrated areas in the state of Florida for it, but I know I do have a couple of family members that were affected by it, one seriously, but he is making a good recovery now. So we're definitely headed in the right direction for him. But other than that, we're pretty much locked up in the house. We don't leave home just to keep ourselves safe,
Right. So do you get at least air, like backyard air and all that stuff?
Oh yeah. No, my daughter and I love to go out and play cornhole, so we'll get the cornhole boards out and go play cornhole.
If you happen to watch, I think they're going to actually do some reruns of ESPN Cornhole Championships. Mm-hmm. And when I first saw this, I was like, that's how much the sport's taken off. It's become a sport now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we have a blast with it. Pre-COVID, I played, used to play in a small bracket tournament here every Thursday night, and we have a good time, and so it's
so cool.
It's fun. It's my relaxation for the week usually. So,
well, this might be a weird question, but why is it important to get real life stories rather than like some scientist who's been studying sleep and all that? Why do we feel the need to get the real life story? I just feel like it's more important in today's world, especially to talk to actual people rather than someone in the lab that's doing all these studies on sleep and whatnot?
I think it's the battle of data versus reality, right? So we should always be looking at data, right? And there's a lot of data out there for sleep, and most of it says pretty much the same things. Consistent sleep the same hours every night. Get at least 6 hours of sleep, and make sure that your sleeping environment is calm and relaxing. And so, those are like consistent things that you'll see that most of the studies, we've been studying sleep for a long time, right? So, because it's an easy thing to study. And so, I don't think there's a whole lot of crazy new information coming out about sleep, but the reality is there is new information, especially as we shift on how people are practically applying those things, right? Because it's less about the sleep, it's more about the practical application and what we do with it, and so scientists that are studying sleep are just talking about the effects of sleep, but they're not talking about the reality of, okay, I'm a small business owner and I did just straight up have to work 90 hours this week because I have projects going on. And so how do you overcome that? How do you push through that? How do you stay effective? That's the reality that I think is so much more important to people than just talking about this study showed that 90% of participants that got less than 6 hours of sleep were 30% less effective. Well, that's great. We all know if we don't get sleep, we don't get our work done. So,
right.
So how do we overcome that? How do you set boundaries? How do you push through that and make sure that you are effective? Because there's always going to be those times. That's why I think it's important to talk to the people that are actually doing it instead of wrapping yourself up in all the numbers all the time.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. And there's so much more we can talk about with this because it is a reality thing and more so than data. But the one thing I will say is I do hope there is some studies on the healthcare workers because I know they're giving it all and they're not getting any sleep right now. And we have to give them a shout out almost every time we're going on the air someplace, right? How much they're working during this. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
What they got to go through. So. Anyway, Adam, thank you for joining me, and we will talk to you soon for sure. Come back when you got some updates for us, and we'll be here.
All right, awesome. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. I'm Alexander Garrett. This has been the Sunday Pod.